Welcome to Bible Fiber, where we explore the textures and shades of the biblical tapestry. I'm Shelley Neese, president of the Jerusalem Connection, a Christian organization dedicated to sharing the stories of Israel's people, both ancient and modern. I'm also the author of the book, Bible Fiber, a 52-week study of the 12 minor prophets available on Amazon. This week's Torah portion covers Numbers 32 to 36:13. The double reading portion of Matot-Masei brings the book of Numbers to its end. Positioned on the plains of Moab, the Israelites stand at the threshold of the Promised Land. This final section functions as a bridge between the wandering generation and the conquest generation. Through legal stipulations, historical recitations, and geographical boundaries, the text establishes a framework for an orderly, holy society. In chapter 32, Moses maps out the boundaries of each tribe's land inheritance. The people have not yet taken possession of any territory, and the prophet is allocating territory ahead of time. The tribes of Reuben and Gad request permission to settle on the eastern side of the Jordan River, attracted by the fertile pasture lands. Both Reuben and Gad possess large flocks. Moses initially reacts with fierce anger. He compares their request to the sin of the spies 40 years earlier. He fears that their desire to stay behind will discourage the rest of the nation. Gad and Reuben negotiated with Moses to settle there, and Moses agreed on the condition that they cross the Jordan as the military vanguard to help the other tribes conquer Canaan. They have to fight alongside their kinsmen until the land is conquered. Only then can they return to their eastern holdings. The Levites did not receive a territorial allotment. The Bible notes that the Lord is their inheritance, serving as the focal point of their devotion. As servants of the people, they lived in 48 towns scattered throughout the tribal territory. Now that the Israelites' wanderings were almost over, Moses recaps the stages of their 40-year journey together. In a dry, inventory-like fashion, he lists the order of all their stopping points. At first glance, the chapter appears to be a repetitive list of geographical names. However, it functions as Israel's official travelogue, tracking 42 encampments across a 40-year journey. This sequence moves from liberation of leaving Egypt to the communal testing and discipline that occurred in the wilderness. And finally, the nation stood on the edge of claiming the Promised Land. The travelogue shows that the difficult, mundane, and painful stages of life are not random deviations. They are part of a deliberate process of preparation. This is one of the few places where the Torah explicitly states that God commanded Moses to keep a written log. Verse 2 notes that Moses wrote down their starting points stage by command of the Lord. In the ancient Near East, kings and military commanders recorded their itineraries and campaigns on stone monuments or papyrus logs. These documents were court-level reportage to validate their conquest and prove their sovereign claims over specific territories. By commanding Moses to formally write down the starting points and stages of their journey, God created an official covenant log for his people. Before the land is distributed by lot to the tribes in the next chapters, this itinerary is a legal brief. It proves that the nation did not simply stumble into the plains of Moab. They were systematically led there by God. Unlike the false gods of their neighbors, the God of Israel moved and acted in history, in places and time, and through a people. Every single step was known, numbered, and sustained by God before they ever crossed the Jordan. The final portion of the chapter shifts from looking backward to looking forward. God issues strict instructions that once they enter the Promised Land, they must eliminate Canaanite idols, dismantle high places, and divide the land by tribal lot. Amid the community planning, the text describes a unique institution. God instructs Moses to designate 6 of the 48 Levitical towns as cities of refuge. In the cases of accidental manslaughter, the accused could take asylum in these cities. 3 of these cities were located on the east side of the Jordan, and 3 were on the west. Once the perpetrator claimed asylum, they stood trial before a tribunal. If the judges deemed the death inadvertent, the accidental killer returned to the city of refuge under protection. Without this protection, they risked death by a blood avenger, a retaliatory practice that still occurs in parts of the world today. The accidental killer remained in the city, receiving food and clothes from family members. According to the law, the perpetrator could only leave the city of refuge after the high priest died. The transition of the high priesthood signaled a new beginning. Something strikes me as uniquely humane about this biblical code of law. It has an advanced moral calculus before the Israelites even had land or a settled society. Premeditated murder resulted in capital punishment. Accidental deaths were treated by a different standard. This system offered compassion for the perpetrator, recognizing that accidental death creates two distinct types of victims. Ancient temples often offered temporary sanctuary, but the biblical network of refuge cities was an innovative judicial system. It replaced unchecked blood vengeance with a regulated legal process. Family members could no longer pursue justice entirely on their own terms. In 2017, I read an article published in The New Yorker by Alice Gregory titled "The Sorrow and Shame of the Accidental Killer." The writer follows the real experiences of several individuals who had to navigate the heavy psychological and social aftermath of causing an unintentional death. In 2 cases, they accidentally struck a pedestrian with their vehicle, and in another case, a caregiver accidentally killed someone in their care through a brief moment of negligence. Of course, the death is devastating to the family of the victim, but the perpetrator also loses the life they formerly knew. Society provides a natural formula to comfort a grieving parent or a grieving spouse. It proves much more difficult to counsel the driver, babysitter, or grandparent responsible for an accidental killing. In her article, Gregory highlights the complete lack of self-help books or counseling services specializing in this area. These individuals occupy a tricky, isolated moral space. After describing the shattered lives of these individuals, Gregory points to the brilliance of the biblical cities of refuge. One effective form of therapy for accidental killers is the company of others who share the same life-altering experience. A parent who accidentally kills a child struggles to look at their own remaining children without pain. No one can quite understand that unique form of grief except those who have walked through it. Cities of refuge offer group therapy where it was most needed. Furthermore, the formal tribunals suggested in the biblical text would bring order to tragic chaos. Accidental killers often feel extreme shame because their outer lives remain unchanged, unlike the life of the deceased. Public acquittal and clear boundaries provide an important psychological framework. The refuge city was a prescriptive consequence to be endured. This boundary matched a common desire for accountability articulated by many accidental killers. One individual in the article went into a deep depression after running over a small child. She said, "If I had been exiled to a city of refuge, I might not have needed exile from myself. That's what I'm looking for, to live in the world with acceptance and with opportunity, but also with the acknowledgement that in running over this child, something terrible happened and it deserves attention." It is surprising to find a secular publication praising the wisdom of biblical law. However, this perfectly captures the beauty of God's good design. The Israelites were about to enter a new territory that had been promised to them and upheld as the goal for decades. However, God also knew they would continue to live in a broken world where terrible accidents happen. He did not just promise that all their hardships would end when they crossed the Jordan River, but He gave them a blueprint for a compassionate society. The cities of refuge prove that divine law is a safety net designed to catch us when we fall. The Bible provides sophisticated answers to difficult human problems. The purpose and intent of God's way is always to provide a path to restoration, both with each other and with Him. That's it for this week. Join me next week as we start the book of Deuteronomy. If you'd like to get the study questions that go with the reading, please visit our website at thejerusalemconnection.us. Shabbat Shalom, and Am Israel Chai.